We're coming towards the end of our discussion on the Menachot, and we're getting closer to our discussion on Tefillin and Mezuzah. So on Chavtes Amud Aleph, 29a, and today for some history of the Menachot. And where are we? We're on line. The line starts with the word konim, ulamaila, and then the word ksiv is the third word. It's about less than a quarter from the top of the page. Ten lines from the top of the page. Yeah? Okay, ksiv. The verse reads, with respect to the Menachot, but it's in Divrei Hayamim. It's in the Book of Chronicles, so it's not in Vayikra, with the instruction, Shmos, with the instruction for building the Menachot. It is rather, it's later, where there's a description of what was. And there it says, Va'perach, and the flower, presumably it's referring to the flowers that were the ornaments, decorations of the Menachot. V'haneres, in the lamps. V'hamilkachim. V'hamilkachim. Zahavu michlais zahav. Okay, the Menachot was cold, and then michlais zahav means taken from gold, kind of. So Gemara asks, "My michlais zahav, what's this repetition of saying taken from gold? You just said it's gold. And then michlei zav, it's repetitive right after each other. It's gold, taken from gold. So there's got to be something here. So Amar Rav Ami, Rav Ami comments and says, look at the word michlois, which means taken from gold, and you can read it in a different way. Michlois has the root word shekilosai, the word kila, which means to consume or to finish, to conclude, like to use up all, to expend everything. That's the word shekilosai. So Rami says the verse is employing the word michlois, taken from gold, to allude to the fact that the Menachot consumed all of the pure gold Shlomo owned. That's how much he invested in making the Menachot, that it consumed all the pure gold he had. So let's see. The Amar Yehuda Amar Rav, for Yehuda said in the name of Rav, Eser Menachos asa Shlomo. Shlomo made 10 Menachos, presumably for backup. When one gets ruined or decays or whatever it is, you have another one ready to go. So Shlomo Melech made 10 Menachos. V'kol achas v'achas, and each one of them, Hevila, he brought, for the making of it, Eser elef kikar zav, 1,000 talents of gold. 1,000 talents of gold for each of the 10 Menachos. I don't know if this is a literal number or an exaggerated number, but it's a lot of gold. There's a rule printed in the back of the Gemara Brachas that every time the Gemara uses a number over a certain number, it's an exaggeration. But I don't know if that applies here or what the number exactly was. Do you remember such a thing, Rabbi Gimple?
You mean for the number here?
Yeah, like they're saying this principle that whenever the Gemara uses a certain number, it's an exaggeration. But I don't know if it applies here or whatever. But it's 1,000 talents. The point is he brought a lot of gold for each one. Here the Gemara uses 1,000. So 1,000 talents of gold is way too big for a Menachot, obviously. The verse said you use 1 talent. Here's 1,000 talents. V'yechnisu elef pamim, and they took this 1,000 talents of gold and put it into a furnace. Lakur, they put it into a furnace or into like a kiln, right? Those really hot furnaces. They put it into there 1,000 times, so as to purify the gold and reduce it. Like as you purify it, it becomes thinner and thinner. Right? The more pure the gold.
Like smelting it or something?
Yeah, but
what it's called?
You burn it out, so all the
impurities, right?
Yeah, all the elements that aren't exactly gold get slowly burnt out, so you have the pure gold. So these 1,000 talents of gold was put into a furnace 1,000 times, v'imidu al kikar, and was reduced to the size of exactly a talent. From 1,000 talents of gold, he reduced it in fire to 1 talent of gold. Again, I don't know if this is an exact number or just an exaggeration, but either way, the point is, but a lot of gold and reduced it to make it the purest you possibly can humanly get.
Because presumably you would need 10 talents, right,
for each menorah, yeah. So, but he took each
1,000.
right, but he had 1,000
Right.
for each, and then reduced each 1,000 to 1. It's a lot.
What's the talent of gold in our measures?
I don't know. Anybody?
Yeah, it's 3,000 shekalim. So
That's not our measures.
No, but in terms of like a measure, it's got a shekel is like half a troy ounce. So 1,500 troy ounces.
You know the English system of weights?
Yeah.
No.
So it'd be like 1,500.
Nobody knows it.
So a rough estimation. What's a
What is
talent?
Troy ounce.
So
As
it's rough.
opposed to a regular
Yeah,
ounce.
because 1/12 a pound and 1/16 a pound. They use troy
He
ounces
knows
for
it.
for the metals.
Nobody else
For
knows
metals.
it.
Yeah,
So
for gold and
just give
silver,
a rough estimate how many
Troy ounces.
Troy ounces, yeah.
a rough estimate of how many ounces is a talent.
Talent is I think it's 1,500 roughly.
Ounces.
Troy ounces, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah,
There you have
that's
it.
the value, yeah.
It's a lot of money.
Yeah,
very
1,000,
expensive.
like a thousand for gold, 1,000
Yeah,
US, so
1,000 US.
so 1.5 million.
Yeah,
It's quite-
1.5 million.
1,000 US for an ounce of gold right now.
Yeah, like 1,200, but yeah.
Something like that.
Yeah.
So we're talking about $1 million.
Oh,
Like
million.
10 pounds?
For that's for 1 key card.
No
Now
idea.
if you have 1,000 key cards, you're talking about.
It's a lot of money.
Sounds like a
So it's
more
like
of
$1
gold.
billion.
Like a brick.
Around $1
Yeah,
billion.
yeah.
A brick of gold is 1 talent. It's got to be more than that.
For each
1,000.
menorah.
$1 billion.
Brick of
Remember,
gold would be
the
more than a
1,000,
talent?
the
Or
1,000
talent?
times.
A talent would be more than a brick of gold, I imagine.
What's 1,600 ounces, did
Yeah,
you say?
something like that. That's right, yeah.
So that would be over that
So
would
it's
be
more
like
like 1,200 ounces.
No, it's about half a troy ounce.
10 pounds. 10 times 16 is 1,600.
10 pounds.
10 pounds of gold is each talent.
No, it'd be more than
It's a
600.
lot.
No, it's
No,
like 100
it's
pounds.
more.
Doesn't sound right.
100 pounds.
That makes more sense.
Because it's
A menorah is pretty big. It's 18 tvachim high.
600.
It's pure gold. It's got to be more than 10 pounds.
Yeah. Because remember, it's 16 ounces, so you're going to 1,600. So it's like
100 pounds.
100 pounds, yeah.
100 pounds of
About
gold.
100.
Yeah.
It's a lot. It's very expensive. All right.
Yeah, they have to carry it that's the point. They have to carry it in the meat bar, so it couldn't be thousands of pounds would be possible.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so the Gemara now challenges this idea that the 10 gold menorahs, this refined gold 1,000 times to make pure gold. The Gemara rejects the idea that this gold depleted the gold in Shlema's reservoir, in Shlema's treasury reservoir, the water. Gemara says, Aini, is this the case? Are you suggesting that because he made these menorahs, he was depleted, he had no more gold left? Vaksiv, the verse reads, in describing King Solomon Shlema's wealth, V'chol kli mashke, all drinking glasses of Hamelach Shlema, of the King Shlema, Zahav was made of gold. V'chol kli beis yar halavanon, and all of the utensils in his other home in the forests of Lebanon, Zahav, Sagar, was pure gold. And the verse continues, Ein kesef nechshav b'mei shneim al ma'umah. Their silver was not worth anything in the time of King Solomon. That's how wealthy they were, and everything that King Shlomo Melech had was gold, so silver was like nothing. So if that's the case, then he didn't run out of gold by making the temple. Otherwise, he would have to use silver for everything else. So the Gemara says, "Zahav sargaka minon." There's different types of gold, and the more pure, refined gold that was depleted, but ordinary gold he had available for everything else.
Where did he get all this gold from? Egypt?
I don't know. Where did he get all his gold?
Some of it, David and Melech, from all of his conquering, he had accumulated.
Shlomo Melech was rich in something, and he traded with Egypt for something else. He was
Also trading, but he got a base from David and Melech himself, because David accumulated a lot of wealth from all the wars.
From all the wars.
David Melech accumulated a lot of wealth, but
Shlomo
Shlomo Melech's primary accomplishment was trading agreements that he had with all these other countries, and made Shlomo Melech very wealthy, made Israel very wealthy at the time. Okay. So the Gemara now says, does throwing. So earlier we said that he had 1,000 talents of gold, and he put it into a furnace 1,000 times, and each time, and it reduced the gold to the point that it came to 1 talent. So from 1,000 talents, it came to 1 talent. So the Gemara challenges this idea and says, Michasa kolahai, does throwing it into the furnace make you reduce so much from 1,000 talents to 1 talent of gold? Even if it's an exaggerated number. Like I suggested earlier, that maybe it's not an exact number, it's exaggerated. Even if it's exaggerated, it's got to be in proportion of something. To reduce that much, the Gemara says, Vatanya, but we have a text which reads as follows. Rabbi Yehuda taught, Maisa, there was such a time. The menorah of the Beis Hamikdash, Yeseda al Shal Moshe, was a bit bigger or heavier than the menorah that Moshe Rabbeinu made. Bedinar zahav kordikini, in a gold dinar of kordikini, which is a very small amount. So, which by the way answers your question. You asked me about whether they started with a block talent and chiseled it out, or whether it ended with a talent of gold. It seems to me, I said that I just assumed that it means they started with a talent and reduced it as they made the menorah. But it seems from here that the actual result of the menorah was a talent.
That's what I thought in the beginning.
That's what you thought at the beginning? Anyway, it seems from here that was the case. Because they found the menorah to be 1 small dinar kordakini, which means you have to be a much bigger professional. Which means to start out with more than a talent of gold and then chisel it out so you get to exactly a talent. It's quite the work.
So why does it say here that it came down to a talent if you need more than a talent to actually...
That's what I'm saying. You'd have to do the calculations to be able to start with more than a talent, hammer it out, to end up with exactly a talent.
Why did
It's
they
quite
say here that it's a talent?
at the end of the menorah. The end result was a talent. So here the Gemara says that the menorah that they had, there was 1 point, the menorah was a small fraction bigger than a kordakini gold dinar, bigger than the menorah of Moshe Rabbeinu. It was a bit more than a talent. So what do? Says Rabbi Yehuda, they put it 80 times into a furnace, then we do al kikar, and they reduced it by that small amount to get to a kikar, to get to a talent. So it would take 80 times to reduce that tiny little amount of weight. And here you're telling me 1,000 times reduced it from 1,000 talents down to 1 talent? The more challenging this idea. Says the Gemara like this: Kivan the koi. Once it stands, it stands. That is to say, once it's been reduced, it's as you reduce the gold and it gets purer, it takes longer to reduce it.
Right, it's like a diminishing...
Right. So when you start out and the gold is very unpure, the first time you burn it out will get rid of most of the unpure elements of it. You do it again, and then even less will come out. So each time you burn it, it's not like each time you put it into the furnace, you reduce it by an equal measure.
It's like a geometric...
Yeah, as you, that's right, it's a geometric decline. As you burn it, it reduces less and less and less and less. So by the time you get to, and presumably the story is during the time of Shlomo Melech, or from his menorahs at least, and the menorah they're looking at that was off by this fraction was already reduced 1,000 times. So to get it to reduce it's such pure gold that to reduce it by such a fraction would take 80 times in the furnace. Following?
But that goes against the other comment that says that it was pure gold that they used.
At the end, they started off in pure gold. You never start out with pure gold. You have to make it pure, right?
You said that there was there was no more gold, so to speak, at the time because they took those.
That's right. He reduced all of. That's right.
But you said that the gold that they used for those 1,000 talents wasn't the same gold as
No.
The kalim.
The gold, his Mel's vessels were all made out of gold.
Yeah.
But at different levels of gold. So he used tons of gold for his stuff. But this purified special gold, which obviously takes a serious amount of effort to make, they have to burn 1,000 times. That type of gold, only that was depleted. Okay. Where am I? Give me the koi. Amar B'Shmuel Bar Nachmani says, Amar Rabbi Yonasan, name of Rabbi Yonasan, my diksiv. What's the meaning of the verse which says, this verse is in Vayikra, describing the mitzvah of lighting the menorah. It says, Ala menorah ha-tahira, that you should light the candles on the pure menorah. This is the instruction that God tells Moshe Rabbeinu, that his brother Aaron should light the menorah light the candles on the pure menorah. Pure menorah? Is there some other menorah? Why does the verse have to say light it on the pure menorah? What are the menorahs that are available? So it says, Rabbi Shmuel Bar Nachmani, in the name of Rabbi Yonasan, This indicates to you, Shayardu Masa, that it's making, the working of the menorah, descended mimakim tahira, from a place of purity. That is to say, it's descended from on high. This is his comment. So the Gemara now challenges it. If that's the case, whenever the Torah refers to a utensil in the temple as the pure one, should you then say that it means it descended from heaven? If the implication here is that the menorah described as the pure one is to tell you that it came from a pure place, it came from heaven, then that would mean every other time the verse describes something in the temple as the pure one, it should come from heaven. And if the Gemara asks, El Me'ata, now, if that's the case, Ala Shulchan Atar, you should place the bread on the pure table. Are you suggesting Ma'asav in Makam Tahar, that the makings of the table also descended from the place of purity? That's not the case. Ella rather, Tahar Machlashu Tameh. The reason why the verse says you should put the bread on the pure temple is because it's susceptible to impurity, and you have to make sure it doesn't become impure. And if it does, get another one. It's a simple law. We're not talking about purity in the spiritual sense. We're talking about purity in the halachic sense.
Maybe that's why they needed so many menorahs.
Maybe that's why Shlomo Melech made so many menorahs. That would explain that, yeah.
Purity issue.
Yeah. So the Gemara is challenging and saying, why are you reading the verse in some extra halachic fashion? That the menorah descended from on high, just translate it the way you did every other time. Put it on the pure table, because if the table becomes impure, it's susceptible to impurity, and if it becomes impure, you can't use it. Likewise here. So Hachanam here too with the menorah. Tahira, make sure you light the menorah on a pure menorah michlal, indicating shitamea that it could become impure. As it seems to have happened during the time of Hanukkah. As you described earlier, they made a menorah quickly out of iron or wood, according to the other opinion, indicating that it could become impure. And that's the simple instruction of the verse. Make sure your menorah is pure. Make sure your table is pure. Why do you have to go to say it? Why do you have to pull the verse out of its regular meaning and say it means it descended from heaven? So the Gemara tells us why it needs to do this. And it's based on the notion that the menorah being pure, or let me put it this way, the fact that the menorah is susceptible to impurity is self-evident. I don't need a verse to tell me that. Which means it's self-evident I should use a pure menorah. Which means when the verse says, light it on the pure menorah, it's teaching you something else. And thus it's teaching that it came from heaven. But whereas when it comes to the table for the bread, it's not so obvious that it's susceptible to impurity. And therefore the verse needs to teach you that it is susceptible to impurity. So let's find out how. Let's find out why it's not so obvious when it comes to the temple that it's susceptible to impurity, and I might have thought that it isn't, and the verse tells me that it could be. And there's a special law that comes along with that. So let's see. Says the Gemara, Bishnei Mahasam. It makes sense there, with respect to the temple, with respect to the table, Shulchan, that the verse needs to tell me that it's susceptible to impurity, because Kedei Shlakish, like that which Reish Lakish taught. The Amr Reish Lakish for Reish Lakish taught. My diksi, what's the meaning of the verse which reads, Ala Shulchan Atar, make sure that you put the bread on the pure table. Says Reish Lakish Mechlal Shutame. This implies that it's susceptible to impurity. And why would I think it's not susceptible to impurity? Because this table is made out of wood primarily, and a wood table that's meant to stay in one place. It's a wood table that's meant to stay in one place, not meant to move. And any wood table that's meant to stay in one place, is not susceptible to impurity. The rule is that the ground is not susceptible to impurity. The earth is not susceptible to impurity. Only utensils, which means movable objects that you use as utensils. Now the rule is, if there's a table that's not made out of metal, it's made out of wood, and it's implanted to stay in one place, so it becomes like the walls of the house, which aren't susceptible to impurity. And therefore this table, which is made out of wood and staying in one place, seemingly should not be susceptible to impurity. So why does the verse tell me that you have to have a pure table, when seemingly it's obviously going to be pure anyway? When the verse tells me have a pure table, it implies that it could be unpure. It could be impure, sorry. Thank you. But over here, how is it possible to become impure? It's it's a wood table that's stuck to one place, it's staying where it is, not moving. So seemingly it's not susceptible to impurity at all.
An extension of the ground.
Yeah, it's an extension of the ground. Halachic's extension of the ground. And that we're not susceptible to impurity. So if it's not susceptible to impurity, why would the verse need to tell me to use a pure one? Therefore, Allah therefore must say, Malambe, this teaches you, says Reish Lakish, that it actually does get moved. And therefore it is susceptible to impurity. And therefore the verse says, make sure it stays pure. When would they move moving it? For people who make pilgrimage. When the Jews make so the Jews who live in Jerusalem, who live within the temple, proximity to the temple, they see the divine revelation, so to speak, all the time. But the people who come on pilgrimage to Jerusalem, so as a welcome, we want to show them some divine revelation. How do they do that? By bringing them to the table. Umadem lahem, and we show them lechem upon them, the bread that's on the table. How does the bread on the table help? And they are told, Ra'u, look at these bread. How precious you are before Hashem. My chibaschem, how is God's love expressed in the bread? Like Rabbi Shub Levi taught. The Rabbi Shub Levi said, Nes Gadol, Nasir Nechem upon him. There was a great miracle done every week with the bread. Silku Kisidroi. It was removed with the same freshness that it was put in a week earlier.
That's in the Mishnah. No defect was ever found.
No defect was ever found in the bread.
Yeah.
Shneimar, the verse reads, Lashon lechem cham b'yom al-kachai, to put warm bread on the day it was taken. As if to say on the day it was taken, it was still warm bread. And therefore, says Reish Lakish, the verse tells me that you have to use the bread, you have to use a table that's pure because it is susceptible to impurity. Why is it susceptible to impurity? Because it's moved. When is it moved?
Pilgrim.
3 times a year. When the pilgrims come, they want to show off, to show them, look how beautiful Hashem loves you for putting this miracle of fresh bread that lasts from week to week. So
do with fresh bread?
sorry?
Do they give it to them to eat?
No, of course not. It can't be given to them to
That's
eat.
why it's called the show. It's called the showbread.
It's called the showbread, that's right.
Show and tell.
Lechem upon him. That's correct. So it shows Hashem's love for the Jewish people. But because they move it, it therefore does not get the law of a table that stays in one place, and therefore it is susceptible to impurity. And therefore the verse needs to tell me, make sure your table doesn't contract any impurity. But Elahacha, with respect to the menorah, the verse says Tahira that you have to make sure to use a pure menorah. Mechlal, the implication is Shitmei, that it's susceptible to impurity. Pshita, obviously susceptible to impurity. Why wouldn't it be? It's a metal object, and every other metal utensil, like any other lamp in the world, is susceptible to impurity. Why not? And therefore, from the fact that the verse says it's a metal utensil, and any metal utensil is susceptible to impurity. And therefore, the verse does not need to tell me to use a pure menorah, because I know that it's susceptible to impurity anyway, so that's what it can't be teaching me. I know that I have to use a pure menorah anyway, because that's the rule with respect to anything in the temple, so there's no reason for the verse to tell me use a pure menorah, from a halachic perspective. Because I know that I know it is susceptible to impurity because it's a regular metal utensil, and B, I already know that you're not allowed to use impure vessels in the temple, because you're always never allowed to use impure vessels in the temple. So what could it possibly be teaching me?
You had to explain it with the showbread because it's wood.
That's right. So when it comes to the showbread, I need to tell you to use a pure one to teach you that it is susceptible to impurity. It breaks from the rule of a regular wooden table that stays in one place because it's moved 3 times a year. And therefore, the verse is teaching me that it is susceptible to impurity, and therefore make sure it's pure. But here, I know it's susceptible to impurity anyway, and I know that I can't use an impure candelabra. And therefore, what's the verse telling me it's pure? So it's free for this extra teaching. Therefore, it teaches me that it descended from a place of purity, that the menorah descended from heaven, and it seems, according to this view, that they actually used the one that descended from heaven. But we'll see, God willing, other views which describe how it wasn't that the actual menorah itself descended from heaven, but rather God showed a menorah and Moshe copied it. All of this to say, and we'll get into the details on Monday, God willing, and perhaps more elaboration on this, and opening the floor for people to think about it. The menorah, of course, as we know, is a source of light, not just physical light, but spiritual light to the whole world. Right? Like the Medrash says, does God need light? Rather, edusu, this is a testimony, referring to the menorah, to all comers of the world, to all people of the world, the presence of Hashem rests amongst the Jewish people. So the menorah is a symbol or the object through which a divine presence is manifest in this world. And therefore, more than any other part of the temple, the menorah has to reflect its spiritual counterpart, and therefore there's always indication of the menorah descending from heaven, or the Moshe Rabbeinu was shown a menorah in heaven and he had to copy it. Whether that's literal, then he had to actually copy the menorah as possible. But more importantly, the idea being that whatever spiritual message or energy that's accompanied with the menorah, Moshe Rabbeinu was shown that, and he was told, the menorah you're going to make is going to be the physical manifestation of this spiritual divine truth. And that's what the Gemara is going, God willing, next week. Have a wonderful day and a good Ner Shabbos.